Hi, my name is Michi Held. Welcome to Daily Drum Lesson. Today we're going to talk about drum notation. Before we start, there is one thing I want to get out of the way. There is this old discussion whether or not you should be able to read and write notes or not. Because there are countless of great and successful drummers who don't know how to read notes. So why should you? All these drummers who don't know how to read notes aren't great drummers because they don't know how to read notes. They are great drummers despite the fact they don't know how to do so. It will just make your life easier. When I hear a song on the radio with a drum part I like, I just write it down. I don't have to try to remember it, what always never works anyway. I just write it down and come back to it later when I have the time. Or when I play with a band and we're working on parts and someone says, "Hey, I like that groove." I write it down and I'm done. I don't have to waste everyone's time by trying to memorize it and play it over and over again until I got it down. I just write it down and can practice it later. And we are yet not even speaking about the nearly unlimited amount of great drum notation out there you get access to as soon as you're able to read it. So go for it, it will benefit you. It is not about being able to sight read, it's about being able to see a notation, decipher it, and then play it. So let's go. These 5 lines are the notation staff. We will later fill it with the actual notes. But first we need a clef, which indicates the pitch of the notes, or in our case, the instrument we are using. This one, for example, would be used for violin or guitar notation. This one would be used for bass. And for drums and percussion, we use this one. Let's say we want to write a piece of music which is 2 bars long. Think of our piece of music as a story, and each bar as a sentence. So we put a bar line here and one here. These are like points to indicate the end of a sentence. And since the second one is also the end of the whole story, we put this other one right behind it. Now we need to define the length of the bars, and about 95% of the time this will be 4/4, which means we can fit 4 quarter notes in one bar. A quarter note looks like this. And since this is 4/4, we can fit 4 of these in each bar. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. I wrote the notes right between the second and the third line, so this is played on the snare. If I wrote it here, it would be played on the tom, or here it would be played on the floor tom, or down here it would be played on the kick. If you have more toms, you can also write them on the lines instead of in the spaces between them. So you can write another tom right here and another floor tom right here. To make things easier to see, all the cymbals are notated with a cross instead of a dot. So the hi-hat is right here, the right cymbal is right here, and for the crash we have to draw an extra line and put it right here. If we play the hi-hat with a foot, we notate it way down here. Now we try to make something cool of what we have learned so far. We keep this idea with a 2-bar piece of music and fill it with hi-hat strokes all the way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. We add some additional kicks and some additional snares and play the whole thing from left to right. We start with hi-hat and kick, hi-hat and snare, hi-hat and kick, hi-hat and snare, and so on. Here we go. Let's change this up a little by moving all the hi-hat strokes in bar 2 to the right cymbal. Let's move the very last stroke to the tom and floor tom. Let's play the crash instead of the hi-hat on the very first stroke. You see, this isn't really that hard, so let's move on and introduce eighth notes. We can play two eighth notes in the time we can play one quarter note. So instead of counting 1, 2, 3, 4, we count 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. If you want to, you can always combine the eighth notes. That way it looks a bit cleaner. Alright, let's try this. 1 bar of quarter notes followed by 1 bar of eighth notes. Let's orchestrate this to make the sound a bit more musical. For the first half, we play this quarter note groove we used earlier. For the second half, we now play an eighth note groove. The snare stays where it is on 2 and 4, the kick stays where it is on 1 and 3, and we basically just double the tempo of the hi-hat from quarter notes to eighth notes. We can also orchestrate this eighth note part to make it sound like a fill. How about snare, 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 tom, tom, floor tom, floor tom. Now we go one step further and divide the eighth notes once more to get 16th notes. So instead of counting 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, we go 1E and R, 2E and R, 3E and R, 4E and R. And again, we can join them together to make things easier to read. Here is 1 bar of eighth notes followed by 1 bar of 16th notes. It sounds like this. Let's try an orchestration. This is the same thing we did with the quarter and eighth notes. We play both bars as a groove, where the 1 and 3 is the kick and the 2 and 4 is the snare. But this time, instead of going from quarter to eighth notes, we go from eighth to 16th notes on the hi-hat. Let's orchestrate the 16th notes as a fill. How about this? This probably looks familiar, since it is the same orchestration we used for the 8th note example. First and second quarter on the snare, third quarter on the tom, and fourth quarter on the floor tom. You can also combine 8th and 16th notes. Let's try 2 16th notes followed by 1 8th note. 1 E and A, 2 E and A, 3 E and A, 4 E and A. Let's try 1 bar of 8th notes followed by 1 bar of this new combination. Let's orchestrate this the same way we orchestrated all examples so far, by playing it on the hi-hat and adding the kick on 1 and 3 and the snare on 2 and 4. And here is the same thing as a fill, like we did in the previous examples. Another combination would be to play the 8th note first and then the 2 16th notes. 1 E and A, 2 E and A, 3 E and A, 4 E and A. Let's hear how that sounds. Let's try this as a groove as well. We move the whole rhythm to the hi-hat, play the kick on 1 and 3, and the snare on 2 and 4. And here is the new rhythm as a fill. First 2 quarters on the snare, followed by the tom and the floor tom. Alright, there is one thing I didn't talk about so far, and that is rests. Each note has a corresponding rest that indicates that we don't play anything at all. I don't want to go in too much detail here, but I just want to give you a quick overview. Let's look at quarter note rests first. We play 3 quarter notes, followed by 1 quarter note rest. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Here is how that sounds at the kit in context with a groove. This is an example for 8th note rests. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Let's bring it to the set. And last but not least, 16th note rests. 1 E and A, 2 E and A, 3 E and A, 4 E and A. 1 E and A, 2 E and A, 3 E and A, 4 E and A. And again, we bring it to the set. Alright, that's it for today. And I know there is lots of stuff we didn't cover yet. I just wanted to keep this real simple to give you the possibility to start and don't overwhelm you with too much information. But this should help you to make it through a lot of good drum notation. Thank you ever so much for watching. If you liked this video, please subscribe to my channel, leave a like, write something nice in the comments below. Over here are some more videos for you to check out, and I see you next time. Bye bye.